This episode is called What's in the Darkness. In the distance, a figure cloaked in twilight's dwindling light emerged, its form indistinct, yet its presence undeniable. Mark's heart quickened, each thud echoing the growing unease that gnawed at his insides. This was no mere traveler. The figure moved with an unnatural fluidity, its limbs bending at impossible angles, its gait a grotesque dance of shadow and moonlight. The figure quickened his pace, closing the distance with alarming speed. Mark, propelled by a primal fear, broke into a run, his boots pounding against the hard-packed earth. The woods around him seemed to lean in, their branches clawing at his clothes, their whispers growing louder with each panicked breath. He burst from the tree line into a moonlit clearing, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. In the center stood a gnarled oak, its ancient limbs twisted in silent agony. Mark lunged for the tree, seeking solace in his solid trunk, his eyes wide with terror. The figure emerged from the woods, its form now bathed in the ghostly glow of the moon. It was tall and gaunt, its skin stretched taut over protruding bones. Its eyes, two pits of darkness, burned with an unholy light. Its mouth, a lipless gash, stretched into a grotesque grin. Mark whimpered, his voice barely a whisper. The figure raised a skeletal hand, its long, bony fingers reaching out to him. Mark squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. But the touch never came. Slowly, tentatively, Mark opened his eyes. The figure was gone, vanished into the night as if it had never been. Mark slumped against the oak, his body trembling, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had escaped, but he knew that he would never be the same. The encounter had left a mark on his soul, a darkness that threatened to consume him. In the days that followed, Mark tried to put the incident behind him. He returned to work, his chores, his routines. But the shadows lingered, whispering doubts, fueling his fears. He found himself jumping at every sound, his heart pounding at the slightest movement in the periphery of his vision. Sleep became impossible. Nightmares plagued him, their twisted imagery a grotesque echo of the figure he had encountered. In the darkness, he could feel the presence of the creature, watching him, waiting for him. His health began to deteriorate. He lost weight. His skin grew pale and sallow, his eyes sunken and hollow. His once hearty laugh was replaced by a nervous titter. His friends and neighbors whispered behind his back, their eyes filled with pity and fear. One moonless night, driven by a desperate need to escape the suffocating darkness of his home, Mark ventured out into the woods. He walked for hours, his feet following a path etched into his memory, a path that led to the clearing, to the gnarled oak. He reached the clearing, bathed in the ethereal glow of starlight. He stood before the oak, his eyes searching the shadows, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. A twig sat behind him. He whirled, his eyes wide with terror. But there was nothing there. A cold wind whistled through the trees, carrying with it the whispers of the shadows. Mark shivered, his body racked with a sudden chill. He knew that he was not alone. He turned back to the oak, his eyes drawn to the dark shape huddled at its base. He approached cautiously, his heart in his throat. As he drew closer, the shape resolved itself slowly into a figure, its back turned to him. Mark recognized the gaunt frame and the unnatural posture. It was the creature from his nightmares. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against the figure's back. The figure turned slowly, its face a mask of horror. It opened its mouth to scream, but no sound emerged. Mark recoiled, his eyes wide with disbelief. The figure before him was not the creature he had feared. It was him. His own reflection stared back at him, its eyes filled with terror, its mouth agape in a silent scream. Mark stumbled backwards, his heart pounding in his chest. He turned and ran, fleeing from the clearing, from the oak, from himself. He ran until he could run no more, his lungs burning, his legs aching. He collapsed onto the forest floor, his body racked with shivers and sobbing. He lay there for hours, the darkness closing in around him. He could feel the presence of the creature, its cold breath on his neck, its bony fingers reaching for him. He closed his eyes, his mind filled with images of the figure, of the clearing, of the oak. He never opened them again. The next morning, Mark's body was found in the woods. His face was frozen in a mask of terror, his eyes wide with fear. There were no marks on his body and no signs of violence. The villagers whispered that he had been taken by the shadows, his soul claimed by the creature that lurked in the woods. Others said that he had simply lost his mind, driven mad by his own fears. The truth, however, was never discovered. Mark's death remained a mystery, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks in the shadows of the human heart. The shadows are always there, waiting to claim us. We can run, we can hide, but in the end, they always find us.